ASUS does not release Formula motherboards every season, so when it does, I do pay attention. Actually, my very first modern build, I want to say, was an ROG MAXIMUS Formula 8, so it does naturally hold a very special place in my heart. And today we are reviewing the imposing ROG MAXIMUS Z790 Formula, the custom water cooling dream for generations of extreme PC builders. Now, fun fact for you, the female lice of the genius Nestrolga have a penis and can have sex up to 70 hours straight. So the Maximus is ASUS' more expensive, enthusiast-centric kind of motherboards, and the Formula, just like the Apex, are products which are very focused and aim to cater to a very precise segment of the market, namely overclocker and custom water coolers, even though the Apex is more on LN2. But in short, it is basically a Maximus Z790 Hero with a massive custom water cooling twist, which is always exciting for enthusiasts of all breeds. Now, starting with the obvious. The Formula shares the very same foundation as seen on the Hero, meaning an extremely sturdy 8 PCB layers logic board reinforced with a protective backplate. Not only does it bring a solid PCIe signal insulation, but also will work wonders in terms of thermal heat diffusion all over the board. A very solid and premium foundation for a very premium product. Design-wise, just as we had seen on the Z690 Formula, the Z790 Formula comes fully dressed in white, making an already very niche product even nicher. There is a very savant play of contrast between the pure plastic white and the more grey aluminum reflections. In a word, it shines and looks like a jewel. If you're going for white or a panda build, this thing will look insane. RGB wise, we do have a fully lit ROG OLED logo dressing the IO roofing, as well as 4 RGB connectors to further suit your insanely attractive personality. CPU socket wise, we are in the last iteration of the LGA 1700 CPU socket, which did introduce both the PCIe 5 and DDR5 standards already 2 years ago. And worth noting, it does support any of the past 3 generations of Intel Core processors, which is rare enough for an Intel CPU socket. VRM wise, well, as I said earlier, we're dealing with the identical power solution seen on the Maximus Z790 Hero, meaning a solid 2390 amps configuration organized in a 20+2+1 direct phases for a 2070 amps grand total, 1800 of which are CPU centric. So not necessarily the most powerful VRM power solution you will have at this price point. I think Gigabyte outputs a much stronger VRM than the ASUS for $200 less. Nevertheless, it still remains a very potent overclocking tool for a very comfortable overclocking experience and will handle any kind of processors Intel has produced so far, including the notoriously heat and wattage hungry i9 of the 14th generation of Intel Core processors. And in addition, I do have to note that everything in there is top quality in terms of components. Even the capacitors, which usually are not the focus of many reviewers, are 10K hours certified, which keeps this motherboard way above its competition in terms of robustness and lifespan. Now, cooling wise, well, that's where things get really interesting here, because we have this large 90 degrees bended water reservoir encapsulated in a metallic shield. It's heavy, it's sturdy, and designed to not only work as a VRM water-cooled apparatus, but also as a dry standalone heat shield. It does feature the usual double contact design ASUS introduced 4 years ago. I do want also to mention that I did not find the usual EKWB or Bits Power water block branding on these monoblocks, which does hint at maybe an in-house job. Temperature-wise, well, we do have to break it down into sections. with and without water. Now, it turns out that without any kind of liquid cooling, the VRM block on its own is rather very good at keeping our VRM at a very acceptable temperature. With my i9 14900K clocked at a 5.9 GHz, and after an hour-long synthetic stress test, both blocks fared brilliantly and stayed around 50 degrees Celsius for the last half hour of the testing. And now, injected with a constant stream of water, temps remained around the same temperatures, but obviously it does manage to stay at this temperature much longer. I mean, almost indefinitely. Something that the VRM blocks on their own without water won't be able to do after a few hours of synthetic load. Obviously, given the fact that our synthetic tests are just not realistically reproducible on your day-to-day gaming or even video editing, I am tempted to say that if you were to run this board without any kind of custom water cooling situation, you'd be fine as well. But obviously that would be defeating the purpose of the formula. So yeah, overall I would give it a solid 9 for, on one hand, a very powerful VRM, and on the other, an extremely polyvalent cooling solution. And yeah, I would not want to see it coupled with anything less than an i7 K-class. I mean, this was designed for an i9, but yeah, i7 minimum, nothing less. Now, RAM-wise, well, we get our usual 192GB of DDR5 RAM, configurable in a dual channel with 48GB sticks and clockable up to a rather fast 7.8 GHz. But to be fair, and as usual, I would not expect to get to those kind of clocks. Manufacturers for the past months, especially with the refresh lineup of Z790, have been trying to say, hey, you can get to 8 GHz on your RAM sticks. It is true on paper, but we don't have affordable RAM sticks who can get anywhere this kind of speeds. And if you do find some, you probably get there on a single stick, which kind of defeats the purposes of having that 192 dual channel configuration. With a fully populated configuration, with 192GB of DDR5 RAM, I would not expect you to get anything, beyond 7 GHz if lucky. So great future proofing for in a couple of years when those RAM sticks will be available, but for now, kind of useless. Now, PCIe export-wise, well, just like the Hero, we are in the presence of a proper dual GPU board, which with the PCIe 5.0 standard is especially interesting and future-proofed. In a single GPU configuration, only our closest export to the CPU can output up to 16 PCIe 5.0 lanes worth of bandwidth for a heavy 64 GB per second of data swap in each direction. In a dual GPU setup, both of our exports now share our CPU PCIe 5 lanes for an 8x8 bifurcation, more than enough to fully support a dual 4090 without any bottlenecking, hence the metallic reinforcements here placed on both of our 16 slots. I do want to note the now famous ASUS very own PCIe release mechanism, which it introduced a couple years ago and which is now copied by all of its competition. It now comes in a more solid and durable design, always a plus in my book. The last export is a dual slot, which can operate up to a surprisingly fast 4 lanes at PCIe 4.0 speeds for a total of 8 GB per second in each direction, which is, well, actually good enough for a PCIe-based M.2 storage solution. Not bad. Not bad at all. Overall, a very complete and fast export solution which cater to both gamers and content producer or 3D renderers, or it's just a very complete export menu of things. Now, storage-wise, we do have the 5 sticks configuration we've seen on the Hero once more, including a PCIe 5.0 enabled one, which unsurprisingly received the bulk of the heat cooling attention with a very tall and dense heat tower plate, the all complemented with a double-sided thermal pad situation, since the PCIe 5.0 standard being that fast can also get that hot, which is exactly the same wording I used for the Hero review, but since it's the same motherboard, stick it. Now, the other 4 connectors can all run up to PCIe 4.0 standard, which is plenty fast, and are cooled by one single thermopadded massive heat plate, which, as I've seen before, can be a heating issue if you try to have a fully populated storage solution, and probably why ASUS decided to provide an additional floor padding to the sticks, most likely to suffer from a heat bleeding video card. Now, I also want to mention that all of our M.2 solid-state drive do have ASUS' very own screwless locking mechanism they also introduced 3 years ago, and which I enjoy seeing everywhere. On the last gooder points, well, I have a couple. I want to start with the fact that our heat plates do not come with their own screwless mechanism, as we've seen on the refresh lineup of motherboard coming from Gigabyte, and that I think was kind of a very simple yet important innovative move on our road to ease the maintenance of a complex build. And finally, I do need to mention what I mention on every Z790 powered motherboard. We do not have enough PCIe 5.0 lanes coming out of the processor to cater both to the GPU export and the PCIe 5.0 enabled M.2 solid-state drive. So obviously, if you are going to try to activate this M.2 solid-state drive, what will happen is a very cruel PCIe bifurcation. So basically, you will need to sacrifice one over the other. Nothing problematic immediately, since we do not yet have any video cards which can bottleneck an 8 PCIe 5.0 lanes, but it does remove some of its future proofing. Now, back IO-wise. First, let me note the presence of our integrated plate, always reassuring, and starting from the left, we have our clear CMOS and flashback button for CPU-less BIOS update, an HDMI output for our integrated graphics, and 2 DisplayPort Type-C outputs, which can directly output our GPU signal. Very, very nice. And amongst our very well stocked menu of USB outputs, I do want to note 2 Thunderbolt 4.0 plugs, which can output up to a massive 40 gigabit per second each. Connectivity wise, let's note a slight LAN upgrade compared to the very lazy 2.5 gigabit LAN seen on the Dark Hero, but most importantly, we do have a Wi-Fi 7 dual band adapter, which is the big thing this month, because all the new refresh motherboard of everybody comes with a new Wi-Fi 7 standard, which, to be fair, brings you much closer to fiber optic over the air in terms of a very small low latency, and also can push you up to, well, say 10 gigabit per second quite easily and painlessly. I do want also to note the fact that ASUS has added a little bit of their touch and innovation sense here, since we do not need to screw anymore, but just plug in, plug out the Wi-Fi antenna onto the connectors, which is not such a bad idea. Not a crucial one, but I do appreciate the innovative drive. And finally, audio-wise, we do have this very premium ALC 4082 from Realtek, serviced by the very generous 500 microfarads worth of signal cleansing capacitors. Overall, and just like the Dark Hero, the Formula strong point is its wireless connectivity and its bandwidth ability, the 2 Thunderbolt 4. That is not something you see every day. Now, cooling wise, well, we do have everything we would need to operate either an air cooling configuration, but most importantly, a very enthusiastically driven dual loop custom water cooling solution. The Water D5 water pumps are here, the flow sensor are there, the temp sensors, and obviously, and again, the EKWB bridge add-on, which will transform the very CPU ability of this board. So yeah, overall, nothing to re-say. Very, very happy here. And finally, troubleshooting wise. Well, the Formula has everything the Hero had, but in addition, we do have a rather good looking and information-packed OLED screen, which will give you voltage, temps, or even CPU wattage consumption, just to name a few. Yeah, nothing to re-say here. Happy as a bunny. I'm not sure how happy really is my bunny, but since I've been using this saying in so many of my reviews, I would think that intrinsically this bunny is rather happy. Now, in conclusion, well, the Maximus formula is not only the premium enthusiast brand who wants to innovate, but also the brand who wants to take care of the nichest of niches. White build custom water cooling builders. Because that's what it's all about. The formula is nothing else than the Dark Hero repurposed and redressed, which is good news. And the formula brings with it all of its Hero sibling luggages. A massive, very reliable VRM, near to perfect robust design, and a massive connectivity upgrade. For the rest, and to stay real with you, this is way beyond niche. It actually feels more like a tailor-made product designed for the five of us, which absolutely love custom water cooling white builds. But for anybody else, which is probably 99.9999% of the population on Earth, I would suggest you stay on the Dark Hero, which with a similar pricing, or a bit even cheaper, I think, will give you everything good about the formula without the custom water cooling headache, because it can be a headache at times, I have to admit. Yeah.